Hi, I'm Ali. Welcome to Grunge Kitchen episode 5, where we're going to make a ginger cake together. This ginger cake is insane. It was originally a Good Housekeeping recipe that I stumbled across years ago, but I've actually made this cake for all sorts of things. And if you know me well, you've probably tasted it. It has always consistently had incredible feedback. I've made it for baby showers. Jackie, big shout out to you. It was your baby shower cake. I've made it for birthdays. It's the cake I generally make for work when colleagues have birthdays. Tim Kavanagh, who I used to work with, is the biggest fan of this cake. And I even used this cake to audition for the Great Australian Bake Off a couple of years ago. And it served me very well. And I got through the first rounds and it was a fabulous cake. It's always well received. Now, it's an unusual method for making this cake. There's a few things in it that are quite sciencey, which I like, but it's really moist, sticky, dense. If you've tried a UK Jamaica ginger cake, Lyons Jamaica ginger cake, it's similar to that. And it's just incredible. It keeps really well. It's high in sugar, but it is a really decadent treat that I would recommend. The album we're going to talk about today is Stone Temple Pilots' Core, which was up against Smashing Pumpkins for the last episode and lost out. So we're going to revisit that, another great grunge album from the 90s. And yeah, let's get going. As ever, you can follow us. Please, if you're enjoying these videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us get the message out there. Share this video. Along the bottom of the screen here are all the social media channels. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Follow us, share these videos, and help us spread the word about the Grunge Kitchen project. And yeah, let's get going. I'll show you the ingredients for this ginger cake. So, ingredients that we're going to need today, there's lots of variants on sugar here, as you can see. Also an beautiful enamel loaf pan that I own. It's quite a big loaf pan because this is a big cake. And we're using, got self-raising flour, bicarb of soda, 3 different types of sugar. So we've got dark brown or muscovado sugar if you can find it. That's the one you want. There's golden syrup in it. There is treacle in it. That's 250 ml of milk. It's meant to be whole milk. I actually use skimmed milk because it's what I have in the house. It doesn't make any difference. 1 egg, butter, and then your spices, which are mixed spice, ginger, and cinnamon. And then you need some kind of ginger. Here in Australia, you can get crystallized ginger in a packet like this, which works perfectly well. Or the original recipe, and I have some because I have stashes of UK supplies. This is stem ginger in syrup, which you don't seem to be able to get in Australia, but it's like little balls of ginger in syrup, and that syrup is like magic juice. So if you can get hold of that, that also works really well. What I will say is this recipe is incredibly adaptable and you can make it vegan very easily. I've made it a number of times, replacing the butter with Nutalex, the milk with almond milk, and the egg with vegan egg replacement, which is just like a paste that you put together. And it works perfectly well, like for like quantities. So if you want to make it vegan, you can. Right, let's get going. Okay, so in here I've got 225 grams of self-raising flour. Doesn't need to be sieved or anything like that. I'm just going to add a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. And then in here I've got my spices. So there is a tablespoon of ground ginger, a tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and a teaspoon of ground mixed spice in here. Don't make the mistake of putting that I have previously of using Chinese spice or anything else. It has to be ground mixed spice. So those are all in here. And then basically I'm just gonna put all of that in there. So you've got all your dry ingredients effectively in that bowl. And then I'm gonna give it a mix so that it's really well blended with all the spices and the flour. And then here I've got my butter. Now this, I've just put it into cubes because it makes this next piece easier, but there's 115 grams of butter here. And I'm basically going to use the same method that you would with pastry. I'm going to rub it into the flour. Now, if you watch the rhubarb crumble episode of Grunge Kitchen, there was a similar method there for the crumble. It's exactly the same. We're basically turning this into a breadcrumb consistency in this bowl. So I'll be back in a second when that's done. Okay, so what we've got here is the breadcrumbs, which you can see, this is the butter mashed into the flour by hand, and it's now like resembles breadcrumbs. And this, what we're going to do now is we're going to assemble the various sugars, which actually get melted in a saucepan over heat on the hob. So what I've got in the pan already, and the handy thing is I've got digital scales that I can reset to 0. So there's a tare function. I don't know why it's called tare, but you can press that button and it basically resets to 0. So what I do is I put the pan on the digital scales and then just keep adding the sugars to it. The other thing that makes this recipe quite simple and easy is that everything's in 115 gram increments. So the butter is 115 grams, all the different sugars are 115 grams. So it's easy to remember. So what I'm going to do now, and I'll speed it up in editing because it'll take some time, is I will also add 115 grams each of the golden syrup and the treacle to this pan, and then we will take it over to the hob and we'll melt it. So here you can see I've got all the sugars in that pan ready, and then I'm also just going to add the milk to this pan, and then we're going to heat it and basically keep stirring it until all the sugars have dissolved and you've got like a bubbling mixture, and that's what you're looking for. I'll show you what it looks like when it's over the heat. Now, the other thing I forgot to say is before I've put that on the heat, I'm actually going to get this stem ginger ready to go in. So I've got 85 grams of stem ginger. It will be that the version in the jar with the syrup or the crystallized version doesn't make any difference. You still need 85 grams. And you just want to chop that into small chunks. You're looking for chunks that are similar to what you'd get of candied peel. If you ever see that in fruit cake, it's that kind of size that you're looking for. So basically each ball, because I'm using the British version with this that comes in syrup, I'm just chopping. And you can smell how spicy and hot this ginger is, but it's amazing stuff. It's really sweet as well. And this is what gives the cake its stickiness and the depth of flavour as well. 85 grams is quite a lot, given that this is quite spicy ginger, but it also is what makes the cake taste incredible and really, really full-on ginger flavour. So if you know anybody that is a big fan of ginger as a flavour in general, this is the cake for them. It's really, really good, and it's very dark and sticky. It's really good. You can heat it up and eat it with vanilla ice cream as a dessert, or you don't really need anything with it on its own. It's incredible. I sometimes make it and put a lemon flavoured buttercream with it, because the combination of lemon with the ginger is really, really nice. But it doesn't really need it. You can literally just make this, like I'm going to do today, into a loaf cake and then just have a slice on its own, and it's good enough that you don't really want to put anything with it or on it. But see what you like. It's such an easy to make and robust cake. So what I'm going to do, once this is all ready to go and chopped up, because we're going to want to stir that into the dry mix of the flour and the butter, the breadcrumbs from earlier. We're going to stir that in now, because when the mixture of the hot sugars is ready, we're going to stir that in, and this needs to already be in there. So what I'm going to do is literally just scrape that into there. Wash my hands because they're sticky. Stem ginger syrup. And I'm just going to stir it in. And you'll see it starts to kind of clumper up the breadcrumbs a bit, but it doesn't matter because this is all going to be in a batter fairly soon. And it is a batter really rather than a cake mixture. But yeah, it's a bit different from other cakes. You'll see what I mean when we do this next step. So I'm now going to heat the sugars over on the hob and show you what that looks like. So I've been stirring this now for a minute or two, but you can still see underneath, like it's effectively two different colours still at the moment. The darker underneath is all of the sugars, and the milk on the top is slightly lighter. But you just kind of keep an eye on it, and it quite rapidly goes from hard to stir to very easy to stir as the sugars melt. But you'll know when this is ready. I'll show you in a minute. So what you want is the mixture to be below boiling point. Don't boil it, but you want it as close as damn it. So you can see there's the odd bubble here, and I'm just going to remove this from the heat. That's done. Ready to pour in. I've also got my baking enamel dish here lined with baking paper ready to go in the oven. And the oven is on 180 degrees ready for this cake to go in, because very shortly it's going to be ready. So this next bit is where the sciencey magic happens, and wait for it, I'll move the camera over to show you. Okay, so I have no idea why this happens, but I assume it's to do with the fact that there's baking soda in this mixture with the dry ingredients. Because if you watch now, I'm going to basically tip this hot liquid into this breadcrumb, and you'll see it kind of bubble and foam and go a bit mental as we start to stir it together. And basically you want to just bring it into a batter, kind of like a pancake batter but a thick one. I don't know whether you can see, but as it kind of combines, it grows in the bowl and it bubbles and it goes very thick. Now the tricky bit here with this recipe, which I'm always nervous about, is you put the egg into the hot liquid, and what you don't want is the egg to scramble, but you want to stir the egg in. So the best way to do it, I've found, is to basically drop it in and very quickly get the egg combined so that it does not have a chance to cook in that hot liquid. Once the egg's in, it settles back down again. And then this is your cake batter. So I'm going to pour this into the tin, and then it's going to go in the oven at 180 degrees for 50 minutes to an hour. But it's a big cake and it's a dense cake. So check with your oven, keep checking it, keep testing it until you think it's done, which is when a knife comes out clean. And while this is in the oven, we'll have a chat about Stone Temple Pilots, but I'll get this in the oven and I'll come back to you. Just showing you what it looks like in the tin. The tin's pretty full, as you can see. It doesn't do a huge amount of rising, but it does do some. And this is going to go in the oven now, and then we'll check in with it in about 50 minutes. So, Stone Temple Pilots Core. Have to admit, this isn't an album that I got into really quickly when I started listening to grunge, and Stone Temple Pilots were a band I got to later. I learned about Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Hole and Alice in Chains first, and then Stone Temple Pilots I actually came to when they released their third album, which was Tiny Music, Songs from the Vatican Gift Shop, I think it was called. There was a track on that called Big Bang Baby that I loved, and because of that I then went back and learned the back catalogue, listened to their biggest selling album, which is Core. That was released in 1992, and I sort of got into it the wrong way round, if you like, just as you do with some bands. But it's a classic from that era, and it's still like a remarkable album when I listen to it now. Though I have to admit, there's a few songs that I absolutely love, and then there's a lot that I like, but it's not one of those albums like Hole's Celebrity Skin or like Nirvana's Unplugged that I would just listen end to end and love. It is an album that I've tended to skip through, and there's singles that I really love, but it's just one that you should know about, and Stone Temple Pilots I think often get overlooked. Having done a bit of reading around it before I recorded this, I never realised that it was quite such a controversial and it split the critics when it was released, this album. The fans absolutely loved it, and they very much, saw it as a grunge album and loved it and loved the sound and got it. But the critics very much berated it and said it was Alice in Chains crossed with Pearl Jam, and derided it basically for being a copycat grunge album. Interestingly, when I was reading about this, I learned that in the same year, in 1992, it actually won Best Album and Worst Album at the same time because of this, the kind of furore that had gone around it about whether it was a copycat album. But nevertheless, it stood the test of time. It has won a number of awards, and it remains the best-selling album. It was also, I think it went 8 times platinum in the end. It was a really good selling record, and made a name for them in countries outside of the US as well. So the main songs that are really well known on it, and the one that I sort of like the most is Plush, and I guess that's the one that gets a lot of high rotation and is very well known. If you looked at their songs off from this time and this album, that's the one that people remember. But it was also the one that I guess for me was most the sound that I associate with Stone Temple Pilots, which is very grunge, it's very rock, it's very alternative, heavy guitars, but really melodic, and that's for me is what makes a good grunge song. So Plush was big. Creep is beautiful. Like that song, was a really strong single, but it's a beautiful song, really melancholy. But one to check out, and I would say, there was 4 singles off this album. They're all strong. For me, the rest of the album's okay, but it's the singles that really sort of stood out. So Creep and Plush were the 2 that I really, really loved, and they stick in my mind. And when I think Stone Temple Pilots, I think of those 2 songs, but also Sex Type Thing and Wicked Garden were the other 2 singles from that album. Both good. Yeah, it's one to check out and see how you feel about it. If you like the genre, but you've never explored Stone Temple Pilots. Now, it's sad because Scott Weiland, I'm never sure how you pronounce that, passed away, sadly, in December 2015, so not that long ago. And it's like there's a curse of grunge artists. So many of them, lead singers, have passed away. And he passed away in December 2015. At that stage, he'd actually also been involved in other music acts, and was kind of seemed, very well known in the industry as well as for Stone Temple Pilots. But I believe that Stone Temple Pilots have since, they had Chester Bennington from Linkin Park as the singer for a while, and then, of course, he's also passed away, and now I believe they've got a 3rd singer. And I just heard that actually they're going to be playing in Adelaide in February next year, COVID permitting, which will be very exciting. So, yeah, this is a different one. This isn't an album that I loved straight away, but I grew to love it, and it's part of that sort of stable of bands that make up the grunge scene and are well known. So give it a whirl. Let me know what you think. And we'll be back very shortly to see what this ginger cake looks like now it's baked. Okay, subscribe below, follow us as always. I'll be back very shortly with the cake. And yeah, that's it. So this is the ginger cake just out of the oven. You can see it's risen a little bit, but not overly. It does sink a little bit once it starts to cool, but basically you're going to leave it on a tray like this to cool for about an hour, and then cut it into slices. Now I've cut into this cake while it's still a bit warm because we want some for dessert. We can't wait. So I'm just showing you what it looks like inside. It's a very dense cake, as I said, but it tastes bizarrely light, but it is very dense. So here you go, this is what it looks like. I'm about to actually put it in these bowls and have it with some vanilla bean ice cream because it's still warm and it's delicious. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Grunge Kitchen. Really enjoyed this one. It helps that my kitchen smells amazing. It smells like Christmas because of that cake, and we have cake. But also really enjoyed talking to you about Stone Temple Pilots, and I'm now looking for ideas for what other albums to do. I'm thinking I might do an Alice in Chains album next, but open to suggestions. So if you have ideas, please let us know. Please do subscribe, follow us, like us, share this video, and thank you for the support. I had a question recently on one of the episodes which I figured I might be as well to address, which was, am I only gonna look at grunge acts? And for the short term, the answer is yes, but I really want to expand it into alternative music per se. Alternative music is what I love, what I've always loved, and is always the intention. But obviously it started from the seed of this idea started very much based in the grunge scene. So longer term, I will be probably exploring other alternative music. I'd love to do heaps on the Britpop scene in the UK and the indie scene, both of which I'm massive fans of. And so yeah, watch this space. I'm really enjoying making this series, and I'll keep doing it until I don't enjoy it anymore. Anyway, if you have questions, please do let us know. You can email us or contact us through any of the social media. And I will see you soon on another episode of Grunge Kitchen. Thanks, bye.